So late last night, while I was out and about, I get a text message from a certain Elon James White
You didn't get a text message.
or an I. Is it not?
What you got was our sophisticated editorial beeping thing that we use that we just implemented. Like
I got a
yesterday.
message on my phone.
Yeah, like literally, I'm bragging about our sophisticated breaking news news editorial thing that I set up about like 3 hours before that she actually got that message.
Exactly. So so on my phone, it went beep, and I got it did. It went beep, and I got a message saying, "Holy cow! There's a Brooklyn riot."
That was the official message.
I think it was something to that effect.
I don't believe that's what original mentioned at all. I believe my message was very, 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 very on top of it. I was very, very news orgy guy at that moment. It was like as I was writing, I was laughing to myself. I was like, apparently there's some sort of thing, blah 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 blah. We need this, that, the other. I asked for research to be found on this, find more information, and that was because I had just saw it, and so I sent it to the editorial team. And I like I said this morning, as we talked about it on AM TWiB, I then tweet out. Like after reading it, I was following some folks that were that were there, and I tweeted out I wasn't surprised. And someone goes, "Well, you can't say that. Don't do that. You can't say that it's a riot because you don't know. You don't know. It's just Twitter. You can't believe things that's on Twitter." And I was like, you know what? You're right. I can't believe things that are on Twitter. And so as I'm doing this, I'm also talking to Aaron, and I'm like, "Hey, there's a thing." And Aaron's like, "You gonna go?" And I'm like,
Yeah, you were gone. There was like a cloud of dust shaped like you proposing a podcast about dust. I don't know where you went, and I just saw you taking pictures an hour later on Instagram.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I will. I will fully admit, I went basically running into the darkness. Like that's it was like it was time. It was already because I wanted to know what was gonna. I wanted to know what happened because there was the reports that were coming out. Like you heard a riot, you heard peaceful vigil, and they're just calling it a riot, and you heard all these different things that I didn't know. And so when I saw the actual address of the thing, I was like, you know what? I'm not too far away from that. I can get there. I was a little bit farther than I thought I was, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to run in there. I'm going to see what's happening for myself to make sure I can. I felt like this. I felt like this was going to become a thing, so I did it. And as we spoke about it this morning on AM TWiB, but like I said, we were going to break this down a little bit more. There was a vigil for Kimani Grey, who was a 16-year-old who was shot 11 times by police officers, and the incident is still a little bit gray. The arguments about what happened and whether or not it seemed as if the teenager was carrying a gun or did the teenager run. There's still a lot of things that aren't exactly sure as to what occurred in this whole thing. So, but there was a vigil. And the vigil, it was supposed to be a peaceful vigil, and they were out there. They were doing that, and there was a prayer thing last night, the vigil today, and then apparently there were some people that were there as well. It wasn't just the community; it was a bunch of folks there, and this is what I know from the ground because, like I said, I went out there, I asked a bunch of people, I spoke to some folks, and actually on the ground, what they said was two things. One, there was a vigil, and then that there was supposed to be that's it. But that all of a sudden there was a plan to go to the precinct. And when that started to happen, all of a sudden it was like, no, the police is like, no, and they started blocking it off. And so I went from where the big crowds were about at 55th Street all the way to the precinct. I went to the precinct first because I heard there were issues there. And when I got there, full-on riot cops. It was like, holy crap, like to the point where I was afraid because there were so many cops, and I realized that I ran directly into a riot, which is not the brightest thing to do, and I also ran directly into a riot, and apparently because I thought I was covered in white privilege and was not going to have an issue with cops being everywhere, Aaron, I will fully admit I don't know why I thought that was a smart idea, but I did. But I do realize, I will say this, Dacia, that I ran into the whole thing with all of my wife's white privilege. Like I said, I rubbed some of her clothing on me as I ran out, but I realized that I also ran out there with a certain amount of black privilege because you know what I wasn't afraid of? The rioters. I ran out into by the way, the supposed rioters. Let me be clear on this because at the time I didn't know and we weren't sure, and so I went out there and I was like, whatever. If there's something going on, let's go. I want to see it directly. Something went wrong. I will fully admit that happened. Like it wasn't just a peaceful vigil. Things went down, and I spoke with the assemblyman, I believe assemblyman Jumaane Williams, who was out there. And actually, I think we have a clip of a statement that he made while he was out there himself. Hold on, let's see if this actually works.
It was a peaceful vigil for the young man Kimani Grey, Kiki, who was shot and killed. By the time I got to the vigil, a group of people had broken off to go to the precinct. I started getting calls about some things that were happening on Church Avenue, so I went there as soon as I could. But Dr. King said, Dr. Martin King said, riots are the language of the unheard. And I think this community has been unheard for quite some time. So this is not to try to excuse destroying your own community.
Right.
But this is not to brush it away and not seek an explanation and not listen to the cries that people are saying. People like myself and many others before me have been saying this is what's going to happen. People don't listen. The mayor's not listening. The commission's not listening. We're calling them to come down to the community tomorrow. Walk and talk to the people. Understand what they're going through. It's very frustrating. I've been trying to get a community center in this community. We don't have one within 2 miles. I have the lowest amount of park space in the entire city. There's a lot of problems here and issues that we've been talking about. We have a mayor and a commissioner who are deaf, and maybe something like this will help them hear. But we don't want it to happen. This is not what we want. We want to prevent it, but we need people who lead and police the entire city, not just part of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, I hope it's clear that he wasn't okaying the thing, because I like flat out when I got there, like when I saw him, because he was in the middle of the crowd, because like I ended up at the police precinct. I saw all the riot cops. I was getting updates as to where things were going down. So like I was like running around the entire thing, and then I ended up taking a dollar cab straight into the middle of it, and it was from the precinct to where the big crowd was that I found. It was about 10 to 15 blocks. And these are like long blocks, and there were riot cops everywhere, just tons and tons of riot cops. And the crowds were out there, and they were very angry. And when I got there, because the fact is that he's friends with Eldroy Williams, political strategist, and our morning anchor on AM TWiB. And so I get there, I see him, I'm like, hey, I know Joy. What was this a riot? Because like I don't believe that the guy who's there in the middle of this trying to get everything okay, he doesn't want his neighborhood painted that way. And he flat out said, yes, I mean, you can call it what you want. You can say this, that, or the other. The fact is some stuff went down. There was property damage. People were going through the streets. Things were broken. And there was definitely an incident that occurred. And when I got there, another thing that I noticed was that there was a lot. The anger was so palpable and so thick that I don't even we were surrounded by riot cops, and people were like cussing them out like directly. That I can't even say some of the Jamaican stuff that was said to some of the cops out there. It was holy crap on a cracker. I have not heard that type of cussing out in a minute. And I to the point where I was like, they're right there. They're right there. But the guy probably was smart because the fact is that with that many cops around, and the fact is like I had cameras on, there were people out there that had cameras on. There was a lot of. It wasn't much he could do to them unless he was doing anyone to take everybody down and take everyone's equipment away. And so, but the interesting thing about this was that there was the idea that one, they weren't going to the vigil. I mean, it was supposed to just be a vigil, and then all of a sudden, at the last second, there was some sort of plan to go to the precinct, and two, the plan wasn't apparently made by the organizers of the vigil, but it was from some sort of outside voices that were that in the neighborhood. Now, I cannot confirm this, and so I want to be very clear that I do not want to want it to be said that TWiB Radio or Elon James White said this is what happened on this part, because this is what I heard while I was out there. But I could not confirm this, so please don't say that. There was statements made that they felt as if the outside folks that they kept saying was in fact members of Occupy, and this is interesting because last year, if you guys remember, when I covered the Trayvon Martin March, there was an incident out there, and I was actually there for the entire march, and I actually saw members of Occupy actually start problems, throwing garbage, throwing glass, yelling, let's go to war, and all those things. And I reported it. I talked about it, and I got labeled as being divisive and attacking Occupy. And I want to be very clear that I'm not attacking Occupy. I was very upset about the fact that something went down, and in that incident that we all of a sudden were talking about Occupy, and Occupy was like trying to have conversations. They were pushing things. They were pushing a certain amount of privilege that they shouldn't have had, and they shouldn't have been doing that with that type of march. And so last night when I get out there and I'm hearing things and that comes up, it sounded right, but I was like, I'm not going to go with something sounding right. That you can't say just because something sounds right that obviously it's true, but this was some of the rumblings that were on the ground.
Right.
This. And so the question becomes, what happened here? And I believe everyone, Dacia, says that this is not okay. This is not what should happen. This is not property damage, glass being broken. None of that's not okay. But then you have to have that moment where you go, well, is it just people just being mad? It's like, or you could look at the fact that this is a community that's been besieged by an occupying force. And when I say occupying force, I'm not talking about Occupy. I'm talking about the NYPD.
Right.
And the fact is that we've talked about it on the show before. We talked about it when Trayvon Martin was killed. We've talked about the fact that for black youth and black parents, it's constantly told that, listen, you have to make sure your child's okay, and you have to be careful above all else. Yes, you don't want them to get into drugs. Yes, you don't want them to get into gangs. But you know what else you need to be really afraid of? The police. And the fact is, it's because of shootings and things like that, and the 11 bullets in a 16-year-old kid. I know. And I mean, and like we talked about this actually last, was it Labor Day? Aaron, your cousin was shot by a cop, or shot in a situation with cops.
Yeah, there was a situation. It was, I think, if I recall, there was a gunman, and it was just a crowded sidewalk. And as a police officer, you're not supposed to, no matter what happens, return fire in a public setting. But they had no scruples about opening fire, essentially into a crowd of about 5 or 6 people, and they shot my cousin in the head by just not even. They were just having a Wild West style shootout, just running forward and shooting one-handed. Just absolutely positively not the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do if anyone's ever trained you to use a gun ever. So, yeah.
So understand what's happening here. When you see stuff like this happens, like in Brooklyn, this is called a riot. So that people are rioting. First of all, there's a couple dozen folks, and like maybe by the strictest legal term that it could be labeled as riot, but that's what you call it here. And when you see something like this, other places, you know what it's called? Civil unrest.
Right.
It's the Arab,
the term riot since over time has changed. It's always been it's almost always been a working class group assigned term, but since I would say the civil rights movement primarily, but even before that, it's been coded as racial. And I think that you could have civil unrest, but then when you call it a riot, especially when it isn't exactly clear that a riot took place, it brings with it a whole set of people's ideas of and perceptions of what Brooklyn looks like, what a riot looks like. Oh, that was just some black folks getting rowdy in Brooklyn, without it actually asking the question of why and what happened. And I think that it's always dangerous when we think about, it's just, they don't have any other way to act. That's sort of like talking about folks as they, and saying that this is the only, why are they destroying their own neighborhoods? Why are they doing this kind of stuff? And it's like, well, if you're being backed into a corner in your own home, you have no other place to go, and you have nothing else to do, you push back. And that pushback looks like all kinds of things.
And not to be funny, a lot of the attacks and stuff I saw, it wasn't. You could say, why are you destroying your own neighborhoods? It was like, I want to be very careful how I say. I don't want this to come off as if I'm condoning anything like this. But it was like, apparently there was some sort of issue at a Rite Aid. I saw a Chase Bank window get shattered. Apparently some sort of pizza shop. Like, these are things that are not exactly. It's not from a neighborhood shop, from someone who lives in the neighborhood, and this is there. These are things that are put there to make money off the back of these people, but it's not necessarily something that is of the neighborhood. You know what I mean? And
right.
So, how do you have this conversation? How do you like really dig deep into this? Because the first thing you want to do is everyone wants to be angry at the people that were out there, and they're like, oh well, you shouldn't be doing these things. And I want to be clear that it's not right, because I see in the chat room someone asked a question that they said the police are wrong in this situation, but they aren't committing the crime in Brooklyn. How much responsibility does the community bear? And I feel as if that is a very, very complicated question. The fact is, the community itself is constantly doing things. Like the fact is that there are programs and there are things that are being put out there to try to help these situations and try to guide people in the right way. But at the same time, how did this situation as a whole come together? Like, how did this neighborhood become this neighborhood that it is now? What happened to create this space? And it's not simply that Negroes went crazy and they just crazy and committing crimes. It's not that simple. And when you simplify it to that, and then you go, well, listen, other people aren't doing that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. Why don't we stop for a second and look at the historical background behind all this and try to see if we can put some context on what exactly happened, how this neighborhood became this neighborhood, what has happened with the resources that were given to this neighborhood, and then maybe let's have the conversation. Personal responsibility is great, and I believe in it, and I believe you have to call people out on things, and if they're wrong, they're wrong. But to ignore the situation of how we got to this space and the environment that we made, like if all of a sudden you have a virus growing on your desk, and you go, oh my God, there's a virus growing on my desk, I'm like, this is crazy. You don't just go virus on the desk, that's bad. You go, well, what happened? What was the situation? What happened on my desk that created the environment that this virus can grow? Like, what happened? Was it the temperature? Was something left out? Like, what happened here that actually now made this virus that is the thing that I want gone? You know what I mean? And we don't do that when we have these conversations about crime and violence within the inner city.
Right. And I think it's important to remember too. It reminds me of what you mentioned before about how when you got to the neighborhood, it was unclear if there was a riot or if it was just the city.
Yes, we were driving down the road, and I'm seeing stuff. I'm seeing tons and tons of riot cops, right? And I'm seeing things broken. I'm seeing a shattered window there, garbage here, and like certain things you could go, okay, cool. That's obviously there wouldn't be a big ass garbage bag thrown through all that all in the middle of the road as people are driving. Even though I have seen that before, but the fact is, the neighborhood, I wasn't sure if it was actually a riot or was it the fact that I was driving through the hood. I didn't know. So a lot of I didn't report something because I was on the scene like tweeting like, hey, I'm here, so and so, the crowd's over there, this is what's happening, and I didn't report like certain types of destruction because I'm like, I can't say that happened tonight. I don't know that it happened tonight. You don't know what's happening in this neighborhood, and it's not me coming in like oh you don't know well you just think that this is just the way. It's like, listen, I grew up in the hood. I've been used to a lot of things just being broken and destroyed and just like that, and no one fixes it, and that's just the way it is. Sorry. Yeah.
I mean, coming out of I wasn't in LA proper. I was just in Southern California during the LA riots, and so what marks a riot for me is fire. And if things weren't on fire, then it may be, That's what
you need to know. That's how you know officially when there's a riot. Fire. Yeah, there was no fire.
Everything is on fire. I mean, LA was on fire.
Right.
I mean, it was burning.
No, we weren't. Brooklyn was not on fire last night. There was a disturbance. There was civil unrest at best in Brooklyn. And so this morning, I even started to call it the Brooklyn situation as opposed to the Brooklyn riots or the Brooklyn riot. People were angry. There were some outside agitators, and this is like it's been boiling over. As you heard Jumaane Williams say, there was that this is something that they've been expecting for a long time. This is something that they were expecting. They're not shocked. They didn't want this to happen, but they were like What was the quote that he used by Martin Luther King? A riot is the voice of people unheard.
Right. And I mean, and I think that either it's. I mean, you can see it as riot, but riot brings with it a whole set of meanings that I don't know, prescribe an irrationality to it. Like, it's just crazy black people in the street instead of it being civil unrest, instead of it being something akin to a rebellion.
Right.
Where you have people who are, historically, when we think of a rebellion or if we think of a revolution, we think of justice. When you think of a riot, you think of madness. And so if we think about this as a revolutionary act, as an act where you have people who are seeking a form of justice, then it can actually change the way that we approach this, because then it begs the question, well, what is it that people are what kind of justice are people seeking? What is the injustice that's being felt in neighborhoods and in communities like this?
I think that's a really, really interesting point. Like that reframing, that entire reframing, because now it's like, well, then what's wrong? As opposed to you guys are just bad. Get over, stop being bad.
Right.
And I mean, you have to realize that in New York, the idea, and we've talked about this a lot, and I realize that a lot of people look at this as a local thing, but I really hope that they can start looking at this as something that should be looked at as a national issue, because it's going other places. Stop and frisk. The fact is that this is a problem in New York, and this is something that this adds to the frustration and the reality. The fact that that me and Aaron both are fully aware that at any point in time we can be stopped and checked and questioned, and the fact is that Aaron is actually stopped and checked and questioned a bit, quite a bit there, sir.
Yep, I think I never realized how many times I've gotten stopped, because the cops bounce off me, because they're just judging every part of me. As soon as I'm being cooperative, they immediately start backing away, but they do come at me like I'm someone else all the time. So
yeah, see, that's. I was, and like I tell you flat out, when I pulled out my camera, I had the full feeling of, you could be hit right now. You could be like they will, like, you. I could get arrested right now, and all I wanted to do was take a picture of what was currently happening. I was scared, and you can say, well, Elon, you shouldn't have been scared. You had the legal right, blah blah blah. You're a part of media. You can cover these things or whatever. Yeah, okay, that's all well and good. I was scared.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the thing is too, is that I think we learned from the occupation in Zuccotti Park that it doesn't matter who you are, the police are going to crack your skulls if you're holding a camera. So especially if you're a black man walking around with a camera, I can't imagine that the NYPD would be like, oh, well, you're carrying a camera, that's legitimate. You know, like, it's just not. That doesn't guarantee you safety.
Yeah,
all.
yeah, it
You know,
doesn't.
I mean, and I think too that the fact that, you know, it makes me wonder what was the report that was sent out to bring in the riot police. You know, like, oh, we've got a large group of African Americans walking down the street, we should bring out the riot police, or was stuff happening?
Well, I believe that the idea that this group of people that were obviously angry were going towards the precinct was a thing. And two, there was garbage thrown around. There's like I heard multiple things with the thing. The garbage about the idea that they were trying to block off the cars from coming towards where they were. So they started throwing that. I've heard that. I've heard that it was like a lot of glass was thrown. I saw glass on the ground, so I that's clearly something that happened. And like I said, when I got there was a lot of anger, and the assemblyman also was pointed out that he knew that this was going on, and he was trying to talk people down. And he was in the middle of it. There was three people. It was him. There was this pastor who I ended up speaking to, and this other white dude in a suit who was kind of like trying to talk people down and try to get figure out what was going on. And I will fully admit, I was not trying to talk people down when I was there, because I didn't know. I'm not even sure exactly what to say. Say, hey, you seem mad. Hey,
Can you talk about that?
do you want to talk? Hey, man. What's the fuss, Bus?
Well, honestly, I hate to say it, but just you keeping someone from damaging something is important, because I feel like a lot of these issues are just because they're just being aggressively ignored. There's a lot. Someone told me when I was younger, and it's kind of true as I get older, that there's a lot of indignance coming from police stations in Brooklyn. Like they genuinely, you go in there, they genuinely have a general disdain for your well-being. And you can tell, and after a few years of that, you do get very, very angry. A councilman mentioned Mike Bloomberg just going to talk to the people and discussing what's wrong would work wonders, honestly.
I mean, judging from my own experience as, you know, someone who lived in Brooklyn for a few years, granted it was bougie Brooklyn, but still, Michael Bloomberg does not care about Brooklyn. If he doesn't care about bougie Brooklyn, he certainly doesn't care about black Brooklyn.
Oh dear.
Does not care.
Oh dear.
He really, I mean, that was my experience. There was that there was no like as long if it wasn't in Manhattan,
Yeah.
he was not. I did not consider Bloomberg to be my mayor when I lived there.
And the best part about it is that everyone looks at Brooklyn as like the new hotspot. It's so awesome. You know, oh, Brooklyn's the new Manhattan. It's like no.
Well, can we vote in Sean Carter? Can he be our mayor? If Mike
No,
Bloomberg
because
doesn't
I
want
don't
to be
want Sean Carter to be
responsible,
our mayor.
I don't want Sean Carter to be our mayor.
Listen, like Sean Carter brought the Brooklyn Nets stadium here. I don't want Sean Carter to be our mayor.
He's not gonna make a huge mall.
I say, I do not want
It's just
Sean
a
Carter.
basketball team. All right. He'd care.
Giant crushed spaceship, slave ship in the middle of the
Yeah,
Atlantic
that's what I'm saying.
Center.
I'm saying he's not going to return. He's not going to bring the slave trade to Brooklyn.
Well, I don't believe he's going to bring a slave trade to Brooklyn, but I do believe that that he would. He's a business man. That's all I got to say about
Really,
that.
really, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Why? That wasn't a jukebox.
It was something. It was something, and it was unsavory.
That was borderline.
It was.
That
it
wasn't
was,
a jukebox. F you.
All right, fine.
I hold my own. That wasn't a jukebox.
It was unsavory. That's all I'm
Your
going to
face
say.
is unsavory. What about that? How you like that? How you like them apples?
Thanks for that.
You enjoy that?
That was wonderful.
Thank you. All right. We're going to be looking at this more, and we're going to be trying to figure out what's more is happening. And we also want to definitely start to keep following up on the Kimani Grey issue. But the fact is, gun violence at the moment is what needs to be talked about, because this is not the only time nor place where gun violence is happening. Prime
No.
example that there has been gun violence actually in Chicago, heartbreaking gun violence, Dacia.
Yeah, there was was it yesterday in Chicago, which has already seen a number of homicides already, looking to break the record of 500 from last year. An infant died on Tuesday morning, 6 months old, after being shot 5 times during a drive-by shooting.
You heard that correct, Aaron.
Yeah.
A 6-month-old was shot with their father, and then later died. Shot
Yes.
multiple times.
Multiple times. He was changing her diaper in the back of I think he just stopped to change her diaper in the back of his vehicle, and a car drove by and shot both of them. And the father is in serious but stable condition, but unfortunately the infant passed in surgery.
Yeah. I'm. By the way, just a side note. I cannot imagine being the father.
I can't imagine being anybody
I'm changing my
involved in
kid,
this.
and we both get shot up, and I live, and my kid is dead. Like, I'm pretty sure that father would have preferred
Yeah, he would have
they
traded.
die and the kid live.
Yeah, he would have traded.
Like, and the father survived that. And I mean, the fact that the kid survived, I think the kid survived like 3 or 4 shots. Like, the kid got hit multiple times, and it didn't die immediately. But holy crap, man! What do you even say or do with any of that? I don't know. I can't say. This is.
And can you believe that there are huge swaths of the country that would prefer that you would be able to, that guy would be able to defend himself if he had a gun, or that everyone should be ignoring this because it's all just black people shooting at each other anyway.
I think we have a lovely combination of both.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people out there that probably think that the baby should have had a gun. I mean, it's not the problem with it. I read numerous sort of the coverage of the story, and some of it is certainly more sympathetic than others. And so there was one site that I read where it went into detail about the criminal history of the father and how he had a criminal background
Oh my God.
Is a current gang member.
Oh
No,
my
you
God.
didn't. No. That really. I mean, because that's the issue right now.
Right.
Because that's the
Right,
issue right
I mean-
now. We need obviously the father brought gun violence upon himself, and so now we don't really need to care about the 6-month-old that's dead. You're right. Thanks.
So after we
And there's no, and where is there winning in this situation? As for example, as the sort of American stereotype of the black man. Like, how is it? How do you break out of that? You're either a gang member who brought this onto your family, or I mean, never mind that he was a present father. He was there in the family van changing his baby's diaper.
Nope.
Don't get to win on that. No,
we
no,
should-
you're a gang member and you're bad.
We should write the sequel to Rapist for Dummies called Human Decency for Dummies, where we outline that a gang member or a criminal is in fact a human being.
I don't think anyone will ever listen to that. And you know what? I wouldn't argue that there are people in the community that wouldn't listen to that.
But yeah, you're right.
I mean, and the problem is, and this is not to at all undermine, for example, the Newtown shooting as a tragedy, but it is continues to horrify me that it takes that moment to make everybody wake up and go, wait a minute, this is a terrible problem, instead of, how many babies that died last year in Chicago alone.
Well, you can't. Well, despite everyone's best efforts, you cannot dehumanize a baby. You can dehumanize the women. You can dehumanize felons, criminals, all those people, gang members. But you can't dehumanize a baby. So we're here, and we finally got here. So good for us. Now we can start moving in the opposite direction, right?
No, not at all.
No,
because the fact is, the only time we can have this conversation, as long as the baby gets killed. If we can put any blame anywhere else, then it's fine. We're going to put the blame everywhere else. But the only time we're like fine, and even then the question becomes, well, like I said, remember Newtown? It's the feminization of the children. If they were more masculine, they could have stopped the shooter.
That's true. It was a lot of women in that school, and then
no, they were talking about the idea that the male children aren't manly enough because we've unmanlied our kids.
Right. So we need to manify them and give them semi-automatic weapons, because it's too hard to hold a single shot weapon. You need to be able to just spray your assailant with bullets from the womb.
Actually, I was thinking that maybe they're from the makers of the Cooch pistol. Maybe the baby pistol. I don't know where you would keep it. I don't know, like keep it like maybe in a teddy bear, and so the baby like is holding their teddy, and then all of a sudden, if some problem happens, they push the teddy bear's a button, and then boom, it fires.
I can't.
From Milton and Bradley, I mean, or I don't know, who makes kid stuff? I don't even know anymore.
Fisher Price.
The
Fisher Price
teddy bear pistol.
Melissa and Doug organic wooden pistol.
Oh dear. Okay, so now I don't want pistols for the annoying Park Slope parents.
Well, they don't need them anyway. Look where they are. They don't need to worry. They're fine.
Know.
It's all over there.
It is all over there. But yes, so what we're talking about this because, and the fact is, all of these things kind of connect, and this is we're just in a state of a problem, and it needs to be looked at more, it needs to be discussed more, and people need to actually stop for a moment and figure out what's happening. How are we doing this? And the fact is, let's be really honest. Let's be really honest for a moment. Chicago has been under siege for quite some time.
Yes.
And it's still and we still have not moved. I mean, at what point does something become a state of an emergency? At what point do you say that we have a war zone in our borders? We need to do something. And by that saying, when I mean do something, I don't mean go lock up all the Negroes, because I feel like someone was right now sitting at home going, wait. We could do something. We could just lock up all the Negroes. Why didn't I think of this already? Martha, call Craig and David and get a meeting over here. We're going to lock all the Negroes up in Chicago, and then we're going to save it, and then we'll be magical and joyous and magical. Don't do that.